On a breezy spring morning in downtown Palo Alto, the air buzzed with the hum of innovation and nervous ambition. Tech executives in tailored suits and fresh college interns with oversized badges hurried in and out of the glass doors of the Pacific Innovation Center, where the city's biggest green energy summit was in full swing. Parked near the curb, under the soft shade of newly bloomed cherry trees, sat a gleaming prototype Tesla Roadster, worth more than most people's houses. The car was meant to be the centerpiece of a flashy reveal by Martin Rees, the sharp-talking CEO of Voltage Motors, a startup dreaming of rivaling Tesla itself. But at the worst possible moment, the Roadster had done the unthinkable. It wouldn't start. Engineers in crisp polos huddled around it, their tablets flickering with error codes. One after another, they peered under the hood, ran diagnostics, and argued about battery modules and circuit fuses. Yet the car sat there, cold and silent, refusing to hum to life. Neither CEO, Martin, stood a few feet back, arms crossed, jaw clenched so tight his assistant wondered if he might break a tooth. If they didn't get the car started in the next 20 minutes, his investors and the press would leave with headlines mocking a billion-dollar flop. A few yards away, unnoticed at first, stood 8-year-old Daisy Harris. She held tight to her father Paul's rough hand. Paul Harris was a janitor at the Pacific Innovation Center, a man with calloused palms and gentle eyes who'd shown up at dawn to mop the lobby floors before the VIPs arrived. Daisy usually stayed home with her older brother, but today her mom had to work a double shift, so Daisy came along. Paul had found her a small spot to sit behind the service desk with her coloring books. But kids are naturally curious, and Daisy had slipped away the moment she heard the worried voices outside. Now she watched, eyes big under a messy fringe of blonde hair, as grown-ups buzzed around the shiny dead car like bees without a plan. Daisy loved machines, not dolls or tea sets, but real machines. She'd spent countless nights perched on a stool in her dad's tiny garage, watching him fix old lawnmowers for neighbors who couldn't afford new ones. "Daddy," Daisy whispered, tugging at Paul's hand, "what's wrong with the car?" Paul tried to hush her gently, embarrassed to be standing so close to men in suits who earned more in a week than he did all year. "Sweetie, it's a fancy car. Something broke inside. We need to stay back." But Daisy squinted at the flickering diagnostic screen one engineer held out. She couldn't read the whole thing, but she recognized some words she'd seen in her dad's repair manuals. Daisy's heart skipped when she realized the men were missing something obvious, something small but important. She stepped forward, but Paul gently pulled her back. "Daisy, don't. These are important people. We don't belong in their way." Daisy looked up at him and whispered, "I can fix it." Paul chuckled under his breath. "I know you're smart, but—" Before he could finish, Martin Rees turned around, overhearing the tiny voice. His frustration broke into an incredulous bark of laughter. "What did she say?" Daisy lifted her chin, voice steady. "I said I can fix it." The engineers looked up from their tablets, some smirking behind their hands. Paul's ears burned with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir. She's just curious." But Martin, desperate and secretly out of options, studied the little girl for a moment longer. The gathered crowd shifted, a few people pulling out their phones. Martin glanced at his watch, then at the car, then at Daisy's bright, clear eyes. "Why not?" he said suddenly. "Little mechanic, go ahead, show us." The crowd parted just enough for Daisy to shuffle closer, her small hands balled into fists at her sides. Paul wanted to scoop her up and rush her away, but Daisy was already kneeling by the open hood, peering into the maze of wires and gleaming metal, her mind racing in the hush of expectant silence. Daisy leaned over the open hood, her small fingers hovering above wires and connectors that looked like a secret city of metal and blinking lights. For a moment, the only sounds were the soft chirps of birds in the cherry trees and the distant click of someone's phone camera. Paul stood frozen, heart pounding, torn between pride and fear that his daughter would embarrass herself in front of people who wouldn't care enough to understand her gift. Martin Rees, arms crossed, watched with a mix of curiosity and desperation. The engineers, red-faced from failing to find the fault themselves, traded doubtful looks but stayed quiet. Daisy took a breath, steadying her hands the way she'd seen her father do countless times. She traced the main power cable with her eyes, then spotted a small junction box under the housing near the battery module. Carefully, she reached into the toolkit one of the engineers had left open. The man flinched but said nothing as she pulled out a small insulated screwdriver. She worked slowly but with a confidence that stunned the adults around her. Daisy unscrewed the panel, gently moved aside a tiny sensor cable, and found a connector that was slightly loose. She could almost hear her father's voice in her mind, reminding her that sometimes the simplest problems hide in plain sight. She tightened it, then tugged lightly to check it wouldn't wiggle free again. Paul's eyes were damp now. He'd fixed thousands of loose wires in old lawnmowers, but seeing his daughter do it here, on a car worth more than every house in their neighborhood combined, made his chest ache with pride. When Daisy stepped back, she looked up at Martin. "Try it now," she said, voice clear. Martin lifted a brow, half expecting nothing, but with nothing left to lose, he nodded at one of the engineers. The man slid into the driver's seat, pressed the ignition sequence, and everyone held their breath. For a split second, there was silence. Then the car's interior lights flickered, the dashboard glowed alive, and the Roadster's electric motor hummed to life with a soft, powerful whir that echoed through the hushed street. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone clapped. Paul couldn't stop a proud laugh from bursting out of his chest. Martin Rees, speechless, stared at Daisy like she was some tiny miracle walking on two legs. He knelt down to her level, ignoring the stunned engineers behind him. "How did you know?" he asked, genuinely baffled. Daisy shrugged, brushing a smudge of oil from her cheek. "It was just loose. My dad showed me once. Sometimes you just have to listen to the machine." Martin stood and faced Paul. "You taught her well," he said, offering his hand. Paul, hands trembling, shook it, barely able to find words. Before anyone could blink, Martin turned to his assistant. "Get their names. I want this girl and her dad invited to our headquarters, full tour, and I want her story in the press release." Today, the engineers, embarrassed but secretly impressed, stepped aside to let Daisy walk back to her dad. She slipped her small hand into his, leaning into his side as they moved away from the Roadster, now purring like a happy cat. As they walked back toward the lobby, people in suits nodded respectfully, parting like a gentle sea for the janitor and his little mechanic. Paul looked down at his daughter, his voice thick but warm. "I guess you fixed more than just a car today, huh?" Daisy beamed up at him, her grin wide enough to swallow all the nerves she'd carried just minutes ago. Back by the cherry trees, Martin spoke to the gathered reporters, telling them how a little girl with oil under her nails saved the day when the best minds in the building couldn't. Headlines would run with words like miracle and genius, but for Daisy it was simple. She just saw what others didn't, and believed her small hands could make a big machine breathe again.